The wind was cold and sharp, cutting through the broken trees and the ruined land. It carried a strange sound, like whispers from far away. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds that blocked the sun. The world felt quiet, but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that made the heart beat faster, like something was waiting in the shadows. Down at the edge of this broken land stood a prince. He was tall, with strong shoulders covered in armor that did not shine like gold or silver. Instead, it was dull and rough, made of something strange. The armor looked like it was made from bones, long, white, and cracked. The bones were not human. They belonged to a race long forgotten. The elves. The prince looked out across the battlefield. The ground was full of white bones. Bones lay everywhere, under broken swords, under crushed shields, and half buried in the earth. The bones reached far as the eye could see, like a sea of white in the dark land. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. Each step made a soft, crunching sound. The prince's boots touched the bones, and they felt cold, almost alive. The armor he wore was made from these bones. The plates on his chest were shaped like long fingers. His helmet was a mask of sharp, curved bone that hid his face. No one knew why the prince wore this strange armor. Some people said it was a curse. Others said it gave him power beyond any man. But the truth was locked deep inside him, and it was a secret no one could understand. The prince paused on the hill and looked down at the battlefield. The wind blew harder, carrying those soft whispers again. The voices of the dead, some said. The prince did not speak. He never spoke about the armor or the bones. He only listened. Suddenly, from the dark clouds above, a single crow flew down and landed on a broken sword near the prince's feet. The bird's black eyes met his hidden gaze. The crow cawed once and flew away. The prince closed his eyes for a moment. The cold wind hit his face, but inside he felt a burning pain. Not from the cold, but from the weight of what he carried. The armor was heavy, not just in weight, but in something deeper. It pressed on his soul, pulling him down. Long ago, the prince had been just a boy. He had laughed and played under the bright sun like any other child. But then the war came. The humans and the elves fought for many years. The elves were strong and fast, but the humans were clever and fierce. The battle ended badly for both sides. Many were lost. The prince's father was the king of humans. He sent soldiers to fight the elves and take their land. The prince watched his father's armies march away, not knowing if they would return. When the battle was over, the prince found the battlefield filled with the white bones of the elves. Something inside him broke that day. The armor had been made from those bones. The prince wore it to remember what was lost and to protect what remained. But it was also a prison. The bones held memories and anger. They whispered to him when the night was dark and the wind was cold. The prince opened his eyes again and looked at his hands. They were covered in bone-like gloves that moved with his fingers. He clenched his fist. The armor felt tight, like it was alive. Far away, the prince heard a soft sound. It was the footsteps of someone coming. He turned and saw a figure walking. Through the mist, it was a woman. Her clothes were torn and her face was pale. She looked tired but strong. She was one of the prince's soldiers. "Your Highness," she said, bowing her head. "The scouts have returned. They bring news." The prince nodded slowly. "Tell me." She took a deep breath and spoke. "The humans are moving again. A large army marches this way. They want the ruins." The prince's heart beat faster. The ruins meant the bones, the battlefield, the armor. "They want your armor, my prince," she said softly. "They believe it holds power." The prince looked down at his chest. The bone plates felt colder. "Power?" he whispered, "or a curse?" The woman looked at him with sad eyes. "They do not understand. But they will try to take it anyway." The prince stood tall. He lifted his sword, its blade shining faintly in the gray light. It was a simple sword, but it had been with him since he was a boy. He held it tightly. "We will protect the ruins," he said. "No one will take them from us." The woman bowed again and ran back into the mist. The prince stood alone on the hill, watching the white bones below. The whispers grew louder in his mind. They told him to fight, to kill, to never give up. But the prince knew something else. The armor was not just bones. It was a part of the elves' souls. They had died long ago to protect their land. Now their spirits lived inside the armor. Sometimes, at night, the prince could feel their anger. It was like a fire burning inside him. He was their prison, and they were his curse. The sun began to set, and the sky turned dark red. The prince's shadow stretched long across the battlefield. He took one last look at the bones and turned to leave. But as he walked away, the wind whispered one last warning. "Run or be claimed." The prince walked back to his camp. The air smelled of smoke and ash. The soldiers were tired, but they prepared for battle. Fires burned, and the sound of metal against metal filled the air as they sharpened their weapons. The prince did not speak. He sat alone, feeling the weight of the armor and the voices inside. A soldier approached him quietly. "My prince, why?" "Do you wear that armor? It scares the men." The prince looked up. His eyes were dark behind the bone mask. "Because it is my burden," he said. "Because it is my pain." The soldier nodded but did not understand. The prince closed his eyes and remembered the day he first put on the armor. The blacksmith had told him, "This armor will protect you, but it will never set you free." The prince had wanted to believe it was a gift. But now he knew it was a chain. Night came, and the prince stood outside his tent. The stars were hidden behind thick clouds. The battlefield was quiet again, but the whispers never stopped. He reached up and touched the bone plates on his chest. "Tell me," he said quietly. "What do you want from me?" For a moment there was only silence. Then the whispers answered. "We want revenge. We want to fight. We want to live again." The prince swallowed hard. He did not know if he was ready for what was coming. The humans were marching, and soon the battlefield would be filled with blood once more. But the prince was ready to fight. Not just for himself, but for the bones, the elves, and the curse he carried. The armor was heavy, the whispers were loud. But the prince stood tall. The war was not over, and this was only the beginning. The prince walked slowly through the dark forest. The trees were tall and old. Their branches blocked the sky, making the forest look like a place where the sun never reached. The air smelled of wet earth and cold stone. The prince's armor made soft noises as the bones rubbed against each other. The armor was heavy, but he did not complain. It was part of him now. He thought about the forge, the place where his armor was made. It was a secret place, hidden deep beneath the mountains. No one was allowed there except the prince himself. Many years ago, before the Battle of Bones, the prince was still young. He did not know the weight of war. He was a boy full of hope and dreams, but the world was changing. The elves and humans fought. The prince's kingdom was in danger. One day, the king sent him on a secret mission. He had to find the forge and bring back a weapon. Not an ordinary weapon, but something powerful enough to change the fate of the war. The prince remembered the path clearly. He walked for days through dark caves and narrow tunnels. The walls were cold and wet. Strange lights glowed in the distance, green and blue. The air grew hotter as he moved deeper underground. Finally, he reached the forge. It was a giant room, filled with strange machines. Some looked like giant claws, others like spinning wheels made of metal and stone. The machines hummed with power, and the air was thick with smoke and heat. In the center of the room stood the blacksmith. He was not like any man the prince had ever seen. His skin was dark and shiny like metal. His eyes glowed red like burning fire. His hands were large and strong, but gentle when he worked. The blacksmith did not speak much. He only looked at the prince with a strange smile. "You have come," he said in a deep voice. "You seek the armor." The prince nodded. The blacksmith picked up a long bone from a pile on the ground. The bone was white and cracked, but it held a strange power. He placed it on a machine that began to hum louder and spin faster. The machine crushed the bone, but instead of breaking, the bone glowed with a green light. It changed shape, bending and twisting into sharp plates. The plates were cold, but alive. "This is the armor you will wear," the blacksmith said. "It is made from the bones of the fallen elves. Their power lives inside." The prince felt a chill run down his spine. The blacksmith's words were both a promise and a warning. The blacksmith continued, "This armor will protect you like no shield. But it will bind you. You will never be free." The prince did not understand. He only wanted to protect his people. He took the armor plates one by one. The blacksmith helped him put them on. The bones fit perfectly, like they were made for him. When the last plate covered his chest, the armor moved slightly. It felt alive, like a heart beating under his skin. The prince looked at himself in a pool of water. The armor was beautiful and terrible. It made him look like a ghost of the old world. "You are ready," the blacksmith said. "But remember, the armor is a prison. It will hunger for blood." The prince wanted to ask more questions, but the blacksmith was already gone, swallowed by the shadows of the forge. The prince stood alone in the dark, wearing the bone armor. He felt different, stronger, but also afraid. Years passed, and the war continued. The prince wore the armor in battle. It protected him from arrows and swords. It made him faster and stronger, but the whispers grew louder in his mind. The voices of the elves trapped inside the bones. Sometimes, when he was alone, the armor moved without his will. His hands would grip his sword tightly, and he would find himself striking enemies even when he did not want to fight. The prince hated the armor, and needed it at the same time. It was his curse and his salvation. One night, after a fierce battle, the prince sat by the fire in his camp. The soldiers drank and laughed, but he was quiet. His thoughts were heavy. A young soldier approached him. She was new and never seen. The prince without his mask. "Why do you wear the bones, my prince?" she asked softly. "Do they not hurt you?" The prince looked at her. His eyes were tired but firm. "The bones carry the past," he said. "They carry the pain of those who died before us. If I take them off, I lose their strength. But if I wear them too long, I lose myself." The soldier nodded but did not understand. She only saw the cold armor, not the man inside. The prince stood and walked away, feeling the weight of the bones press harder on his soul. That night, the whispers came again. They spoke of revenge and war. They begged him to fight harder, to kill more. The prince lay awake, listening to the voices. He wanted peace, but the armor wanted blood. He closed his eyes and wished for freedom, but freedom was far away. The next day, the prince returned to the forge. He needed answers. He moved through the dark tunnels, his armor clinking softly. The green light from the machines flickered in the distance. The blacksmith was there, waiting. "You returned," the blacksmith said. The prince bowed his head. "Tell me the truth. What is this armor?" The blacksmith smiled sadly. "It is more than bone and metal. It is a prison for the souls of warriors who fought long ago. They gave their lives to protect their land." The prince's heart ached. "They live inside the armor," the blacksmith continued. "They hunger for vengeance. They want to fight again. You are their cage and their weapon. Can I remove it?" The prince asked. The blacksmith shook his head. "No, if you take off the armor, you will die. It has become part of you." The prince felt cold. "Then what do I do?" He whispered. "You must control it," the blacksmith said. "You must learn to wear the armor without losing yourself." The prince nodded. but he knew it would not be easy. The days passed and the prince practiced. He fought against the armor's whispers. Sometimes he won. Sometimes the armor won. One evening, he stood on a cliff overlooking the battlefield. The wind blew hard, but the armor did not feel heavy. He raised his sword to the sky and shouted, I am the prince. I wear the bones, but I will not be their slave. The echoes of his voice rolled across the land. For a moment, the whispers were silent, but the war was not over. The prince knew the humans were coming. They wanted the armor. They wanted the power inside. And the prince would have to fight, not just for his kingdom, but for his soul. The sky was heavy with dark clouds. The wind blew cold and steady over the ruins. The battlefield of bones lay quiet beneath the gray sky. The prince stood on a small hill, looking far into the distance. His armor creaked softly with every breath he took. The bone plates that covered his body made him look like a ghost walking in the cold world. Far away, beyond the forest line, a dust cloud rose slowly. It grew larger with every passing minute. The prince's sharp eyes saw it clearly. An army was coming. Not elves. Not monsters. Humans. The humans were coming for the ruins, for the bones, for the armor. The prince tightened his grip on his sword. The leather wrapped around the handle was worn and soft from years of use. The blade itself had seen many battles. It was not magical or special, but in the prince's hands, it was a symbol of hope and pain. His soldiers gathered behind him. They were tired but loyal. Some wore scraps of old armor, others carried simple weapons. None of them had the bone armor. Only the prince had that. A young scout ran to the prince, his face pale and sweaty. My prince, the human army marched faster than we thought. They are strong and many. The prince nodded. How many? Thousands. They want the ruins and your armor. The prince's heart beat faster. He looked over the white bones on the ground below. They want me. The scout swallowed. Yes, my prince. The prince turned to his men. Prepare for battle. The soldiers began readying their weapons. They sharpened blades, checked arrows, and prepared shields. The prince watched them, feeling a heavy weight inside. It was not just the armor. It was the burden of being different. The prince was no longer fully human. The armor had changed him. He could feel the whispers inside the bones growing louder. They told him to fight harder, to kill without mercy. But the prince fought to keep his mind clear. He did not want to lose himself to the armor's hunger. Night fell, and the sky turned dark blue. The stars hid behind thick clouds. The prince sat near a fire, his armor glowing faintly in the firelight. The soldiers kept watch, eyes sharp in the darkness. The prince touched the bone plates on his chest. Why do you hunger for blood? He whispered. The armor was silent for a moment, then the whispers returned. We must live, we must fight, we must protect. The prince closed his eyes. He remembered the blacksmith's words. The armor was a prison for the souls of ancient warriors. They were trapped inside the bones, hungry for revenge. The prince's hands shook. I am not your slave, he said quietly. The whispers grew louder, almost like a roar in his mind. You are our cage, our weapon. You will obey. The prince opened his eyes and stood. No. The soldiers looked at him with surprise. They had never seen their prince like this before. Suddenly, a shout came from the scouts. The humans are close. The prince raised his sword. Get ready. The battle began. Arrows flew through the air, cutting the silence. The prince moved with a speed that surprised even him. The armor protected him from the sharp arrows and heavy swords. His sword swung with power and precision, but the armor's hunger was growing. It pushed the prince to fight harder, to strike without mercy. The prince struggled to control it. He saw a human soldier charging at him. The man's eyes were filled with fear and anger. The prince raised his sword to block the attack. The armor moved before the prince did. His sword cut deeper than he wanted. The soldier screamed and fell. The prince's hands trembled. He lowered his sword and looked at the fallen man. "Stop," he shouted. "Do not kill without cause." The soldiers heard him and hesitated. The prince's voice was strong, but the armor inside him raged. The prince took a deep breath and tried to calm the whispers. "We fight to protect, not to kill," the battle raged on. The prince fought fiercely but tried to keep his mind clear. He knew the armor's power came with a price. After hours of fighting, the humans began to retreat. The prince and his soldiers stood victorious, but the cost was high. Many men lay dead on the battlefield. The ground was soaked with blood. The prince looked down at his hands. The armor was stained red. The whispers inside were quiet now, but he knew they would return. A soldier approached him. "My prince, you fought bravely. But the humans will return. They want the armor." The prince nodded. "Then we must be ready." He looked out over the ruins again. The bones lay still in the cold night. The whispers inside the armor grew soft. The prince closed his eyes. He wanted peace, but he knew the war was far from over. The night was dark and full of cold winds that whispered through the broken trees. The stars hid behind thick clouds. The prince stood on the edge of the ruined battlefield. His bone armor shined faintly under the moonlight. The cold plates pressed tightly against his skin, as if they were alive. His breath came out in soft clouds. The smell of blood was strong in the air. The ground was soft and wet from the rain. Everywhere lay broken weapons, shattered shields, and the bones of fallen. Warriors, elves, and humans mixed together in silent rest. Tonight was different. The prince knew the humans would return. The first battle was just the start. The hunger inside the armor grew stronger with every passing moment. The prince stood with his sword in his hand. His soldiers gathered behind him, tired but ready. They looked to him for strength. They believed the bone armor made him powerful, almost a god. But the prince felt scared. He could hear the whispers from the armor inside him. They were voices of the dead, angry and hungry for revenge. The bones wanted blood. They wanted war. The prince closed his eyes and tried to calm his mind. "I am not your slave," he whispered. "I am still me." But the voices grew louder. They shouted in his head, "Fight, kill, take their lives." The prince opened his eyes. His hands trembled as he gripped his sword. The bone plates moved slightly, almost like they were breathing. Suddenly, a horn sounded in the distance. The human army was close. The prince felt his heart pound hard. This was no longer a battle to protect. This was a fight for survival. "Hold the line!" The prince shouted. The soldiers raised their weapons. The prince stepped forward, ready to meet the enemy. The humans came fast. Their armor was strong and shiny, their swords sharp and deadly. The prince could see the fire in their eyes. They wanted the ruins, the bones, and the prince's armor. The first arrow flew through the air, straight towards the prince. The bone plates blocked it, the arrow shattering on impact. The armor was strong, stronger than any shield. The prince raised his sword and charged. His steps were heavy but sure. The whispers inside the armor urged him forward. He felt power flowing through his body. He struck the first enemy. The sword cut clean through the man's armor. The soldier fell with a cry. The prince swung again, faster this time. His sword was like a storm, cutting through the enemy soldiers. The armor moved with him, protecting every part of his body. But then, something changed. The prince felt the armor take control. His hands moved faster than his mind could follow. His sword struck harder and deeper. The prince saw the faces of the fallen soldiers, their pain, their fear. He tried to stop, but the armor did not listen. The prince's eyes glowed faintly green. The whispers became a roar. "Kill, destroy, feed." The prince's sword cut through a soldier's shield, then through his chest. The man screamed, and the prince's hands did not stop. His soldiers looked at him with fear. The prince was no longer fully himself. The armor had taken over. "Stop!" The prince cried out. "I am still me." But the armor pushed harder. The prince's sword struck another enemy. Blood sprayed across his armor. His heart raced. He wanted to stop, but the hunger was too strong. The battle raged around him. The prince fought like a whirlwind, unstoppable and terrifying. The humans fell back, afraid of the bone-armored prince. But inside, the prince was breaking. His hands shook. His breath was fast and shallow. The whispers filled his mind, drowning his own voice. At the end of the battle, the ground was red with blood. The prince stood alone in the middle of the ruined field. His sword was heavy, and his armor was stained. Dark red, he looked down at his hands. They were trembling. The prince wanted to cry, but the armor would not let him. A soldier stepped forward, his face pale. "My prince," he said softly, "you fought well, but you were not yourself." The prince nodded slowly. "The armor, it took control. I could not stop it." The soldier looked worried. "What will happen next time?" The prince did not answer. He only looked at the bones beneath his feet. The whispers inside the armor were silent now. But the prince knew they would return. That night, the prince could not sleep. He sat by the fire, his armor cold against the heat. The soldiers around him whispered in low voices, afraid of the prince's power. The prince touched the bone plates on his chest. "Why do you hunger for blood?" he asked the armor. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a soft voice whispered back, "To live, to be free." The prince closed his eyes. He wanted to believe it. He wanted to believe the armor could be his strength, not his curse. But deep inside, he knew the truth was more dangerous. The armor was alive. And it wanted more than just protection. It wanted war. And the prince was its weapon. The camp was quiet. The fire burned low, sending soft orange light flickering across the prince's face. He sat alone, far from the other soldiers. The weight of the bone armor pressed down on his shoulders, heavier than ever before. His eyes were tired, dark rings underneath them. The battle had left him exhausted, but his mind would not rest. He could still hear the whispers from the witty bones, the voices of the ancient elves trapped inside the armor. They called to him in the night, voices filled with pain and anger. The prince closed his eyes and tried to calm the storm inside. "What do you want from me?" he whispered. The fire crackled softly, and for a moment, the night was still. Then, out of the shadows, a figure appeared. She stepped into the light of the fire, a woman with silver hair that shimmered like moonlight. Her eyes were bright and clear, but filled with sadness. She wore a long cloak woven from leaves and vines, and her skin was pale, almost glowing. The prince's breath caught in his throat. "Who are you?" he asked, rising slowly to his feet. The woman smiled gently. "I am an elf," she said. "A spirit of the old world. I have come to tell you the truth." The prince's heart pounded. For years, he had only heard whispers. Now the spirit stood before him, real and clear. "Tell me," the prince said. "Tell me what I must know." The elf's eyes grew distant as she spoke. Long ago, the elves fought to protect their world from humans. They were strong, fast, and wise. But the war was long and cruel. Many fell. She paused and looked at the bone armor. "The bones you wear belong to those warriors. Their souls are trapped inside, bound to the armor by a powerful magic." The prince's breath caught. "Trapped?" "Yes," the elf said softly. "They gave their lives to protect their land. But their spirits could not rest. They were bound to the armor, cursed to live forever as weapons of war." The prince looked down at his hands, covered by the bone gloves. "And me, what am I?" "You are their prison," the elf said. "And their cage. You carry their anger and pain. You carry their curse." The prince felt a cold weight in his chest. Is there no way to free them? The elf shook her head. The magic is old and strong. Only one who truly understands the pain and sacrifice of the elves can break the curse. But it will cost much. The prince's mind raced. What will it cost? Your life, the elf whispered. The prince closed his eyes. He wanted to believe. There was another way. But deep inside, he knew the truth. The armor was not just protection. It was a prison. A burden he could not escape. The elf stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. You must decide. Keep the armor and the power it gives. But lose yourself piece by piece. Or find a way to free the souls and risk everything. The prince looked up at the sky. The clouds had cleared and the stars shone brightly. I will find a way, he said. For the elves. For my people, for myself. The elf smiled and nodded. Then she began to fade into the night. Wait, the prince called out. Will I see you again? The elf's voice was like a whisper in the wind. When the time is right. She disappeared, leaving the prince alone with the fire and the fire. Weight of his decision. The next morning, the prince woke with a heavy heart. The camp was busy preparing for the next battle. The humans would return, stronger and more determined. The prince dressed in his bone armor. He felt the cold plates settle on his skin, the whispers stirring inside. He went to the blacksmith's tent. The blacksmith was busy sharpening swords and repairing armor, but he looked up as the prince entered. You have seen the elf spirit, the blacksmith said quietly. The prince nodded. She told me the truth, the blacksmith sighed. The armor is alive, but it is also a prison. You carry the souls of warriors long dead. They hunger for war. The prince clenched his fists. How do I control it? The blacksmith looked at him with tired eyes. You must learn to listen and to lead. Not to be a slave, but a master. The prince's mind was full of questions. Could he truly control the armor? Could he lead the souls instead of being led? He left the tent and walked to the edge of the camp. He looked out over the ruins, the bones glowing faintly in the morning light. The whispers inside the armor grew louder. This time, they were not angry or hungry. They were waiting. The prince closed his eyes and reached inside himself. He tried to feel their pain, their sacrifice. He tried to understand. For the first time, he did not fight the voices, he let them speak. And in the silence, a new strength grew inside him. Days passed, and the prince trained harder than ever. He practiced controlling the armor, learning to move with it, not against it. The whispers became less like voices of anger and more like a chorus of warriors standing beside him. The soldiers noticed the change. The prince was stronger, but calmer. He fought with purpose, not rage. One evening, the prince stood alone on the battlefield. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky red and gold. He raised his sword to the sky. I am the prince, he said. I wear the bones, but I will not be their slave. I will be their leader. The whispers answered him, softer now. We follow you, the prince smiled. For the first time, he felt hope, but the war was far from over. The human army was gathering strength. They wanted the ruins. They wanted the armor. They wanted the prince. The prince turned away from the sunset. He had a choice to make. The armor was a curse, but also a power, and he would need that power to protect his people, to protect the bones, to protect himself. The sky was dark and heavy with storm clouds. The wind howled across the ruined battlefield. The prince stood tall on the highest hill, his bone armor shining faintly under the gray light. His sword was in his hand, ready. Far below, the human army marched closer. Thousands of soldiers moved like a wave, their banners heavy with dust. They were angry and strong. They wanted the ruins. They wanted the bones. They wanted the prince's armor. The prince's heart beat hard. He looked at the white bones that covered the land, the bones of the elves who had once lived here. He felt the whispers inside his armor rise up like a storm. The armor was no longer just a shell, it was alive. It moved with him, and sometimes it moved without him. The prince closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He remembered the old elf spirit's words. You are their prison and their leader. He was no longer their slave. He raised his sword high. Today, he shouted, we fight for our home, for the bones, for the future. His soldiers cheered and raised their weapons. The prince stepped forward, the armor's whispers turning into a powerful song of warriors long gone. The humans reached the foot of the hill and stopped. They looked up at the bone-armored prince and saw fear in his eyes. But the prince was not afraid. The first arrow flew. The armor moved before the prince could react. It blocked the arrow, shattering it against the bone plates. The battle began. The prince charged down the hill, his sword cutting through the air. His soldiers followed, ready to fight. The humans fought hard. They had weapons, numbers, and anger. But the prince and his army had something stronger, the power of the bones, and the will of the prince. The prince swung his sword with skill and speed. The whispers inside the armor gave him strength, but he kept control. He fought not to kill, but to protect. He saw a young soldier charging at him. The prince raised his sword to block the attack. The two swords clashed with a loud ring. The soldier was strong, but the prince was stronger. With a swift move, the prince disarmed the soldier and knocked him to the ground. Go, the prince said. Live to fight another day. The soldier looked surprised but obeyed. The battle raged on. The prince fought with power and grace. His armor moved like a living thing, protecting him from every blow. The whispers were quiet now, peaceful. They followed the prince's lead. But then, the prince heard a terrible sound. A deep, angry roar coming from the ruins behind him. He turned to see the bones on the ground beginning to move. The elves' spirits trapped inside the armor were awakening. The bones rose, forming shapes of warriors made of light and bone. They stood behind the prince, ready to fight. The humans gasped in fear. The prince raised his sword and shouted, If I cannot be free, then no one will. The bone warriors charged forward, joining the battle. The humans fled in panic. The prince and his bone army stood victorious. But the price was clear. The armor had taken more from the prince. The whispers were louder, hungrier. The prince felt the power growing inside him. He knew the war was not over, but he was ready, for now he was not just a prince, he was a legend,